Hello class. So today we will be looking at another topic which is focusing more on instrumentation, designing questionnaire, reliability and validity. As you remember, one very important component of doing quantitative research and qualitative research is to have the instrument that you want to measure. Yeah, the instrument to measure the constructs involved in the topic that you are looking at. Yeah, this instrumentation can be either quantitative survey instrument or qualitative protocol that we can use to interview our respondent if we are looking at qualitative data for our research. First of all, let's look at what are data. Data refers to the kind of information that we look for in order to answer the research question that we have for our study. Yeah, remember when we develop our proposal, one of the things that we have to have is research question followed by research objectives. So these research objectives have to be measured somehow in order to give answers to them. So how do we measure it? By developing a good instrument that can give us answer to each and every one of the research questions that we have, and fulfill all the objectives that we have set up for the study. Okay, so that's why we need to measure data. Yeah, data is information. Okay, so this information can be in the form of demographic information, psychographic information, and anything that can be used to answer our research question. Okay, demographic information refers to profile of the respondent. So we need to know the profile of the respondent because otherwise we cannot link back their opinions, attitude, their perception, everything else that we measure to the person or the respondents that we have identified. Okay, so by having the profile or the demographic information set up and recorded, then we know how old is that respondent, whether is a he or she, the ethnicity, religion, and all, because these are the demographic of that particular respondent. So from that we can take statistical look at statistical distribution of the profile of our respondent. Okay, and we also need to take look at scales, get scales that can measure information such as perception, attitude, opinion, and everything else, because from that, the scores that we get from that test will be used for us in the analysis that we want to do in order to get the answer for our research question. Okay, so the data come from those scores that the respondent have identified in the instrument. Okay, and it also refers to responses to the research question in the interview. Let's say we're doing this qualitatively, so all the information, the conversation, the feedback, the reaction that we get from the interviewee, those are all data that we have to record, we have to transcribe, and later we have to make sense of by doing some kind of analysis. Normally for qualitative, we do thematic analysis. Okay. So the data can be either primary or secondary. Primary means this is the data that we as researchers collect ourselves. We go out there in the field, we distribute our questionnaire, or we set up our interviews so that we can actually record and collect all the information ourselves. That is primary data. Whereas secondary data, these are data that has been collected for us by past researcher. That data such as published report on past study on something on anything that we are looking at. Yeah, these are data that has been collected by other people. It can still be useful for us. Yeah, for example, the record of arrival in between 1990 to 2000 that may have been recorded by Ministry of Tourism Malaysia. So we can look at that and use it for any purpose in our study, yeah, because that is recorded data. Okay, and it is considered secondary data because we did not collect the data ourselves, but we rely on published information that we get from others' work. Okay. So in order to take primary data, to collect primary data, we have to have instrumentation. Comes from the word instrument. Yeah, instrument means the tool or the platform or the medium that we need to use in order to collect all the information that we need. Okay, this can be any kind of questionnaire, rating scale, paper and pencil test, anything that the researcher uses to collect data. Okay, these are all called instrument. The whole process of preparing to collect data is called instrumentation. The process means the work that we do to review the information from the literature in order to find out what past researcher has used to measure certain construct, and what they have, how they have distribute, what kind of sampling technique or strategies that they use. All these are information for us to really understand whether the instrument that we are doing is the correct one for the purpose of our study, and the design of our research is suitable to make sure that we get the information that we are looking at. Okay. So instrumentation involves not only the selection or design of instrument, but also the procedures and the conditions under which the instruments will be administered. That means we need first of all to develop the instrument, the paper-based instrument that we need to use in collecting the survey data, or the list of questions we want to ask in our interview protocol. Okay, and then we have to also decide where we want to do this data collection. When is the most suitable time? What kind of duration is suitable? What time of the year is suitable? Because as you know, if we are looking at the industry itself, tourism, hospitality, and event industry, these are very seasonal in nature. So there are times when we can find a lot of respondents because it's a high season, a lot of tourists around, a lot of potential participants around, and there are also low season when you will have to work extra hard in order to get the number of responses that you are looking for. Okay, so you need also to decide how often you need to go out and collect this data in order to get the numbers that you want. What time is the most suitable to approach all your potential respondents, and most importantly, who are they? Who are the unit of analysis that you're looking at? Because you cannot just survey any tourist or any participant or any person. It has to be somebody who fit the description of the unit of analysis that you need in order to answer your research question. Okay, for example, so when we are looking at the data, we have to be able to answer all these questions here. Yeah, we need to have a data that is reliable. So we have to take measures that can ensure our data is reliable. Reliable here means it is meaningful. Yeah, it is something that can be believed. Yeah, and it is accurate, consistent, and stable. Yeah, in terms of measuring what you are supposed to measure. Okay, we also have to ask questions about validity. Okay, validity means, are we really measuring what we are supposed to measure? Okay, is the questionnaire that we have able or qualified to answer the research question that we have? Yeah, would it give the right information? would it give relevant information? So that is something that we have to be very careful of in order to ensure validity. Okay, we also have to make sure that the questions we have in the instrument is objective. Objective here means it is not biased. You know what bias means, right? Bias means you already have a set of answer for that particular question, and you are leading your respondent to give out similar answer to what you expect. That is not a good kind of questioning, because that would give an answer that you want to get rather than you should get. Okay, so there is no objectivity there. That's why you have to make sure that the design of your questionnaire is objective. It will not be biased towards anything, and it will not be leading the respondent to answer in a certain way, or in a way that you want. Okay, because that will make your research invalid. It will make your research biased and not useful. Okay, so we have to make sure that there is an absence of subjective judgment. We do not have any subjectivity in questioning our respondent. Okay, so the design of the question has to be in such a way that it is objective. Also, we need to answer the question of whether the data that we will get from that particular set of question is useful. Will it help you in answering your objective? Will it help you in answering your research question? Will it be easy to use? Will easy to administer? Yeah. Is it appropriate? That means it will not have any sensitivity issues to a certain ethnic or certain minorities. Okay, is it easy to analyze later? Because if you do not, if you have a data that is difficult to analyze, then what is the point, right? If you cannot analyze it, then you cannot make inferences from your data. Yeah, so you have to think about that. You have to think about how easy or how difficult it is later to interpret the results, and in terms of costing also. So there's a lot of information, a lot of consideration that you have to do in order to make sure that your instrument is a good instrument. So in the next slide here, we need to know that there are two types of instrument. Some instruments can be completed by the researcher. That means you as the researcher will be asking the questions from your respondent to the respondent, and you will take the answer based on the feedback that you get from the respondent. Okay, so some example of this would be rating scales, interview schedules, observation forms, tally sheet, performance checklist, and everything else that the researcher himself or herself can take or can complete. Another kind of instrument is the kind that needs to be completed by the subject, by the respondents themselves. Okay, so this kind of questionnaire, you have to give it to the respondent with a pen or any thing that they can use to make their writing, and give them some time to think and answer according to their own perception and perspective and opinion regarding to the question being asked. Yeah, so this is actually a very the more common type of instrument being used. So questionnaires, self-checklist, attitude scales, achievement test, performance test. These are all kinds of instruments that we usually use in order to have a subject completed exercise, meaning we use an instrument that can only be completed by our respondent. In terms of scores means the number that we get in the end, the data that we will generate in the end, the findings that we will generate in the end after we analyze the data. Okay, the raw scores means the initial score that we can obtain from anything. So any descriptive data like the majority, minority, answers, you know, all these are raw scores or initial score. Okay, so once we have these raw scores, we can analyze it further to have what we call a derived score. Okay, derived scores are obtained by taking raw scores and converting them into a more useful scores on some type of standardized basis. So this is when we analyze, and the derived scores will be the scores that we get after the analysis. So it can be in terms of percentages, yeah. Raw scores would be frequencies. Frequencies would be raw scores, but percentages would be derived scores, yeah. And we all the other more complicated scores like Z scores and T scores are also derived scores. Z scores is the conversion of raw data to a standard score when the conversion is based on the population. You remember the difference between population and sample? Then you will know that population is the entire unit of analysis that we are looking at, whereas samples will be just um, an example or a segment of the population that we use for our data analysis. Okay, so z-score is the conversion of raw data to a standard score when the conversion is based on the population mean and population standard deviation. Okay, when you study, when you have a look at SPSS, you will know or you will understand more about what is mean, what is standard deviation, and the like. Okay, but I would also encourage you to use the internet to just get a basic understanding of what these words means. Okay, just for your own information. Okay, T-score is the conversion of raw data to the standard score when the conversion is based on the sample mean and sample standard deviation. So again, Z is based on population and T is based on sample. So that's the difference. Okay, when we look at this score, we look at two things. We look at the mean and we look at the standard deviation. Standard deviation is the number used to tell how measurements for a group are spread out from the average. How different, how widespread they are, how diverse they are compared to the average, yeah, or the expected value. A low standard deviation means that most of the numbers are close to the average. That means almost all of the respondents are almost the same. Yeah, whereas the high standard deviation means that the numbers are more spread out. That means there's a lot of diversity in the sample that you get. Okay, that's what standard deviation here means. Then we also have to look at the measurement scales. When we develop our instrument, we can develop the instrument using these 4 scales, which I will explain in more details in the future slide. Yeah. But at this point, you just need to know that there are 4 types of measurement scales. One is nominal scale, and then there is ordinal scale, then there is interval scale, and then there is ratio scale. Yeah, so measurement scales convert different amounts of information, and some types of statistical procedures are inappropriate. Yeah, for example, you cannot get value from nominal scale. Nominal scale is just name. Okay, it just indicate. For example, as I will mention also in the future slides that you will be getting, gender is a type of nominal scale. So there's no value there. It's either gender, male or female. Okay. And then there's order, where you rank things from 1 to 10. Okay, you give a ranking, so there's a value there between from 1 to 10 or 1 to 50 or whatever. Yes, but there's a value or order there. So ordinal comes from the word order. Okay, interval, we present question that has interval values. That means, for example, we ask them their income, and the interval is more than 50,000, between 40 to 49,000, between 30 to 40,000, or something like that. Yeah, there's an interval. that is presented there, so that respondent can just check, okay, what is their income, in which bracket their income belong to, which interval, okay, and then they can use that. And then there is ratio, which is almost like interval, but it has a definite zero. That means anything that is below zero will not be considered compared to interval. Okay. So there are some questions that are not appropriate for interval. There are some questions that are not appropriate for ratio. And I think this will be more clear to you when you listen to my future slides on the measurement scales. Okay. Right now, it's just important for you to know the basic. Okay. Then once we have the data, we have to start preparing for analyzing the data. Okay, so analyzing means the data that we collect will have to be calculated or tabulated in some ways so that we can get some meaningful score that we can infer, that we can make conclusion from. Okay. So in order to have a good data, a good finding, we have to have a data that has been scored accurately and consistently. We have to have a data that has been scored exactly using the same procedures and criteria, so there is no differences or conflict anywhere in the design. Yeah. Once scored, the data must be tabulated and coded accurately and systematically. That's why we use something, an application, in order to tabulate the raw data if we get it from the quantitative questionnaire. Okay, and this application is SPSS, which you will get to know more in future slides. Okay. Survey design techniques for tourism and hospitality research. Here are some of the guidelines for survey. First of all, the survey has to be systematic. Systematic means it is carefully planned and executed. Okay, so that's why you have to have your proposal ready first before you start going out for your data collection, because the proposal will guide you step by step. It has a documented guidelines that you can use to make sure that what you are doing at the field when you do your data collection is systematic, and it is also appropriate in terms of the coverage of the content that is looking at. It is sound and it is efficient. Yeah. The service should also be representative. That means it is closely reflecting the population of possible cases. That's why you have to define who your unit of analysis is, and then look at where you can find this unit of analysis. That means the population that you should be looking at. And then you need to sample in such a way that you have enough sample to represent the entire population. Okay. The survey has to also be objective. We have mentioned the word objective before. Objective means no biasness, no subjectivity. Everything is proper without introducing any biasness from the researcher. Okay. And of course, any survey has to be quantifiable, because otherwise, how else would you do your analysis and make your inferences and discover your findings? Okay. So it has to be quantifiable. It has to yield data that can be expressed in numeral terms. Okay, the following is the type of surveys that you can find when you are doing research in tourism, hospitality, and event. Okay, we can get one type of survey is survey of records. Records, you know what record is, right? That means things that are there storing some information for a number of time already. So you can survey the records. Yeah. So this does not involve direct response from people. Instead, you are looking at secondary information. record, and you're surveying that. You're making your conclusion from what you understand about the records. Okay, so it is non-reactive. And then we also have the mailed questionnaire. Mailed questionnaire surveys are most commonly used surveys, but also it is most sterile and misleading. Sterile means you will not get as much feedback as you wanted, because sometimes it's lost in the mail, or people do not pay attention to it, or they just like look at it briefly and then forget about it. So in the end, you don't get the response rate that you are looking for. Yeah. Telephone surveys also widely used, but as you probably have experienced, if any telemarketer is trying to survey you, people immediately want to hang up when they are being contacted for any kinds of survey. So again, this will affect the kind of response rate that you will get. Okay. And then there's also group interview. Group interview means you are interviews several people at once. Yeah. Sometimes we call this focus group. Yeah. This is also possible. But focus group means we allow discussion. So the outcome of a focus group is more quantitative rather than qualitative. Okay. So focus interview refers to basically to focus group that I mentioned just now. Okay. Whereas individual interview refers to interviewing a single person at one time. Okay. So you will be having a face-to-face discussion with that person using a set of questions that you have developed beforehand. Okay. So this is mostly qualitative when we talk about face-to-face interview. If we are doing it using protocol, either semi-structured, structured, or unstructured interview protocol. Yeah. Structured means they say whatever, you just take, and there is no room for wandering to other topic. Whereas semi-structured interview protocol means you ask them certain question, but you allow them to explain more, or elaborate more on that particular answer. Yeah. Whereas unstructured means you just let them go, ask them one question, and just listen to whatever that they're saying, no matter for how long, or no matter which angle they are talking about from, and using that as your data. You can do that too. Okay. Type of questionnaire survey can be divided into 7 types. This means quantitative, yeah. Household survey means you go house to house and interview them using a standard questionnaire. Or street survey, that means instead of going to their houses, you intercept them while they are doing shopping, or walking in the street, or waiting for the bus, or anything like that. Okay, and then ask them to participate in your survey. You can use, as I mentioned just now, telephone. Yeah. And but of course you have to be aware of the pros and cons of using telephone, mail survey, and also e-survey, because all these surveys are not face-to-face. Yeah, all these surveys require some kind of medium. For example, telephone, you have to have telephone, and you can only access people with telephone. People who do not have access to this technology, they cannot be part of your respondent. Mails, maybe it is a more it will access more people, because I think everybody can get mail. But nowadays we have emails. Yeah. So snail mail, we call it the old style snail mail because it's slower, are less popular compared to email nowadays. Yeah. But still, once you have the address, then you can send the questionnaire to the target respondent. E-survey is the same. You probably need some kind of email address in order for you to share your survey, your e-survey, let's say SurveyMonkey or something like that, the link If you want to share the link to your target respondent, then you have to have their emails as well. Okay. And then other category of survey is user survey or visitor survey or on-site survey. This means we intercept them at the site itself. We go into, for example, Taman Negara, and we go to the people having a picnic or having a, anything. They're walking, they're hiking, whatever, and you stop them for an interview or ask them to participate. That is visitor survey or on-site survey. Some people, they just wait at the gate, the entrance gate, and then try to distribute their questionnaire at the gate. That is also feasible. Okay. And then another one is captive group survey. Captive means they cannot go anywhere else. Yeah, captive means, for example, they are in a cruise ship, so you can easily access them because as long as you are in the cruise ship and they are in the cruise ship, they cannot actually run away from you. So that is captive. Or in an airplane, or in a bus, or in a taxi, or in any places where the respondent can say no, but they cannot get away from you if they want to. So captive group survey is actually doable, and it makes it easy target, or gives you easy access to people, because usually they are in when they are in the bus or in the train or in the any kind of vehicles, they are not going anywhere, so they have time, they can fill up your questionnaire. Okay. Okay, here are some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of the surveys that I mentioned just now. Okay, records are non-reactive. So when we use records, we cannot get extra information outside of what was already there in the record. Yeah, but they are inexpensive. So that means easy to get. Don't cost a lot of money. Yeah, they allow historical comparison and trend analysis. This is important. This is, if your survey requires you to look back at the history of certain things, then record is one of the kind of survey that you should be looking at. Yeah, records often are accurate and up to date. They provide an excellent baseline for comparisons. Okay, if that means if you manage to get records that are up to date, updated constantly, then you are in luck. But otherwise, most records will be very old. Yeah, so you have to look at the year that the record is kept in order to make sure that they suit the purpose of your research. But those are advantages. Disadvantages of survey of records is that they may involve confidential restriction. If it says they're confidential, that means you cannot access it, even though you really want to. Or even though the information is really relevant to your study, you cannot, because it's already marked confidential. Okay, they are often incomplete, inaccurate, and out of date. Yeah, when we talk about record, we're talking about the past, things that have been stored in the past. Of course, there will be issues of inaccuracy or out of date situation. And then changing rules for keeping records often make year-to-year comparison invalid. Okay, because when we compare things, we have to compare similar things. Okay, and when we talk about records, it's not necessarily similar, because laws changes, rules changes, procedures changes. So what may be valid in 2018 may no longer be valid in 2019. So how can you compare the 2 years, right? So that it will make it very misleading for you. Okay. And then purpose of records is usually unrelated to the purpose of survey. So that's why I said just now, you have to determine how relevant is that record to the purpose of your survey, because otherwise it is useless. Okay. And the data are factual only, and so there's no way you can put a context to the information that is in your hand. Okay, you do not know the circumstances of that information, because the data are all factual. Okay. Mail questionnaire. is good because it is inexpensive, wide-ranging in the sense that, as I said just now, everybody have access to mails. They receive mails. Yeah, so it is wide-ranging. It can be well designed, simple and clear, and can be self-administered as well. That means when the respondent receive it, he or she can answer the question themselves, yeah, and can be made anonymous. The respondent can choose not to put their names or their details on the feedback that they give. The disadvantages of a mail questionnaire is low response rate. Yeah, as I mentioned just now, when we do mail survey, you have to actually give them also your own address, an envelope with your own address and stamp on it, so that they can, after they answer the questionnaire, they can mail it back to you at no cost. Yeah, just a little bit of effort on their part. If you don't do that, then of course they would not send back your questionnaire, even though they have answered it, because it gives them no benefit to do so. Okay. No assurance that the questions were understood, of course, because the researcher is not there. Nobody to guide the respondents about certain question if the question is confusing. Okay. No assurance addressee actually was the one who answered. That's true too, because once this mail reach a household, then how can you tell for sure whether it is answered by the housewife or the husband or the child or whoever? Yeah, so you do not know. You have no control over who actually answered those questionnaire. Telephone survey. In terms of advantages, telephone survey is less costly than face-to-face because you don't have to travel. You can just call. Can be conducted daytime or evening, so it's quite flexible. It permits unlimited callbacks. If people want to call you back, if they have your number, it's easy for them to do so. Yeah, you can do it at home, or the respondent can do it at ease in their own home. And some school of thoughts, this makes the respondent become more candid, meaning they are more honest in their answer. Yeah, so that's another advantage of telephone survey. And also it can extend geographical coverage. So as long as you have the number of these people you want to become as your respondent, then you can reach them. Disadvantage of using a telephone survey is some phones are unlisted. Yeah, unlisted means they hide their numbers from the public, so you cannot get access to those numbers, and so you cannot call them. Okay, not everyone has phone. Yeah, particularly low income homes. Okay, but nowadays I think this is not really a big issue, because I think about 90% of the population has a phone, at least a basic phone, and the rest have like more smartphones and things like that. Yeah. Telephone survey can be viewed as intrusive into home privacy. This is why when we receive anything from telemarketers, we immediately want to, stop the conversation because we feel uneasy. Yeah. And also, when we use the phone, we rule out many face-to-face advantages. We are not able to see the reaction of the person as they are saying what they're saying. Okay, so you cannot really understand the context of it, just like the mail just now. If we do a group interview, the advantages of that is that it is more efficient because you get to do so many people at the same time. Okay. Result reflect group behavior and consensus, not individual. It reveals group interaction patterns. Okay. As with brainstorming, it can stimulate productivity of others. That means when people are together, yeah, when you do the, how you say, focus group, you can see how they interact, what their chemistry looks like, how they react to one another. That gives a lot of information to the researcher, yeah, about the context behind all those attitudes and perceptions. Okay. Disadvantages of group interview is that they may intimidate or suppress individual differences, because when there are so many people talking at the same time, then people who are most dominant, they talk a lot, they talk the loudest, they are the ones who will be listened to. Whereas the quiet ones, they will not be heard. Yeah, so we have that problem. It fosters conformity. Those people who doesn't uh, they don't want to have conflict, or they don't want to strengthen their voice. They just say, okay, yes, I follow you, I agree with you. So that is conformity. Okay. It intensifies group loyalties and can rigidly polarize opinions. This here means when we have so many people talking at the same time in the group, then we may have polarity where, person A is have one opinion that is totally in conflict with person B, and then the rest of the group will either support person A or person B. So you have like a groupie or subgroup divided there, and everybody wants to say that they are right. So that is, polarized opinions. It is also vulnerable to manipulation by an influential and skillful member. This is what I said about dominance just now. If in the group there are one or two people who are dominant, then they talk the loudest, they talk a lot more, they always answer all the questions on behalf of the group. These people are the one that manipulate, and the rest cannot have their ideas heard. Yeah, and so that's not good, because that will lead to biasness. In terms of individual interviews, the advantages of that is that it is personalized, one to one. It permits in-depth, free responses. It is flexible and adaptable, because you can arrange, or like you can talk to the person according to how they react to you, so it's adaptable. Allow impression of respondents' gestures means body language, yeah, tone of voice, home environment, etc. Yeah? So you can see again the context around the person's feedback. The disadvantages of that is that it is expensive, time consuming, may intimidate or annoy respondents with a racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic background different from the interviewer. Yeah? It is open to overt manipulation or subtle biases of the interviewer. This means if the respondent is the quiet type, or the kind that would not the kind that is submissive, yeah, so then he or she can be easily manipulated by the biasness of the interviewer. It is also vulnerable to personality conflict between the interviewer and interviewee. It requires skilled and trained interviewers. Otherwise, the interviewers may not be able to get the respondent to react the way they are supposed to react, and it may be difficult to summarize the finding. Okay, unless you transcribe the interviews again, and then you find common themes, or what we call thematic analysis. Yeah? Self-completion questionnaire. The advantages is the participant can complete the questionnaire at their own pace. They can take their time. It is more convenient to them, and they can also this is the same as mail surveys. Yeah, they can take their time in filling up the questionnaires. The disadvantages would be the researcher cannot be sure who actually responded, just like the mail survey just now. The respondent is unable to seek clarification unless the researcher is present. So you don't know if the answer is vague. You cannot know answer them why. The respondent may not understand the language of the questionnaire, so they do not answer properly. Lower response rate results if the researcher is not present. They can choose to not, complete the questionnaire properly. Yeah? So that would be very disadvantageous for the researcher. And then questionnaire survey, the advantage would be is less expensive than semi-structured or in-depth interviews. because in-depth interviews means you have to set up time, you have to meet them, maybe over coffee or things like that. Yeah, so those all costs. Data can be collected and processed quickly using questionnaire survey. Contains uniformity as the same questions are asked. Maintain the objective epistemological position. Enable a wider geographical distribution at a lower cost when you use questionnaire. The advantages of questionnaire is that closed response sets restrict answers by participants. When we have a quantitative survey questionnaire, then they can only answer based on what options are given to them in that questionnaire. In-depth data is not gathered. Yeah, so it's not like the interviews where you can get in-depth data. A passive activity for respondents. Yeah, it's not an active interaction with the researcher. It's an intrusive form of data collection, so sometimes people would not want to participate. And lack of reciprocity, that means whatever the respondent gave is just one way. Yeah, so if they don't get anything back from the researcher, then it maybe they lack motivation to complete the questionnaire properly. So that's why, as one of the key strategy to collect data when when you distribute your questionnaire, is to also offer them a token of appreciation in the form of like keychain or something like that, in order to motivate them to complete the questionnaire properly. So when we design the questionnaire, some of the factors that we have to consider is the relationship between the research problem and information requirement, types of information to be included, the wording of the questions. Yeah, wording is important because we want objective questions. We don't want subjective questions. We want clear questions. We don't want vague questions. Yeah. The ordering and layout of questions is important also to make it look good and look easy to understand. Coding of a questionnaire for computer analysis, you decide this later once you have all your raw data. Problem of validity, requirement of time budget studies, and things like that. Okay, so that's why we have to have like a simple checklist when we are designing our instrument. Okay, first on the list that we need to check is whether we use simple language, whether we shorten our question, not long-winded question which can be confusing. Okay, whether it is single focus rather than multiple focus question. Yeah, simple and clear questions are important. Yeah, non-leading question used. Okay, use of negative is free from confusion. That means the question is clear and in measuring what is supposed to measure. You also make sure that you filter the question based on the kind of respondent that you are looking at. Yeah, make it like a layman term. Do not use jargon. Do not use terms that are difficult to understand by your respondent. Definitions has to be provided when necessary. Question must be free from ambiguity, and you have to have indirect approach for sensitive questions. Do not ask sensitive questions directly because it's very important for you to take care of your respondents' sensitivity. You need to have some kind of time frames if necessary. Yeah, and you have to have allowances for unframed opinion. That means you put the question of other there. Okay, so you give them option A, B, C, D, E, and E means other. So you give them a blank and they can put anything that they want on the by filling up the blank. Yeah, and then categories to make diminished detail responses. Okay, so that means we have to make sure that you have suitable categories to capture all the detailed responses. If they have to uh, give too many answers to that particular question, so you give them instead categories, so it's easy for them to just check the categories. All right, this is the questionnaire design process. Yeah, it starts from the conceptual framework. Once we have the conceptual framework, we have the research question, we understand the problem, then we will be able to least the information required to answer those problems, to fulfill those objectives. Yeah, and then we will decide the strategy, whether we want to use questionnaire or telephone questionnaire or a telephone survey, or any type of survey. Okay, and then we will draft the design, we pilot test the data that we get, and then we use the pilot test results to improve the questionnaire and come up with a final design. Alright, response set refers to alternatives provided to respondent when completing a questionnaire. Okay, response sets for questions should be exhaustive. That means it should be covering everything it's supposed to cover. It should be mutually exclusive. That means if the answer of A and B should not be almost similar, it should be totally different and easily distinguished, so the respondent can tick properly whether A or B is the answer to that particular question. Yeah, it has to be unidimensional. Remember, complicated question, double A question, these are not welcome. This will make your instrument invalid or not measuring what it's supposed to measure. Okay. So that's why when you do a response set, you can include checklists, you can include ranking scales, Likert scales. You can use semantic scales. Semantic means using adjectives. Yeah, that is from one range to another. Like for example, good to bad, strong to weak. You can use scenarios. Yeah, you can give them like a scenario, and from that scenario, they can give an answer. And you can also ask them open-ended question. Yeah. So again, when you're preparing your response set, you can use checklists as your response set. You can use ranking scales. Yeah, you can ask them to rank 1 to 10. You can use Likert scale. Likert scale means you have strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. 5 Likert scale or 7 Likert scale. Yeah, and they can choose whichever. You can use semantic, meaning using adjectives. Okay, you can use scenarios. That means you give them like a story, and then based on that story, they can decide. And you can give them open-ended question. Open-ended question means you ask a question, and they can elaborate by filling up the blanks that you provide under that question. So again, simple language, questioning, single focus, non-leading, and also filtering. These are all important steps in making sure that the question we construct for our instrument is useful and valid, and measuring the information that we need to answer our research problem and to fulfill our research objective. Okay, and also we can give them definitions. This is, for example, if we have to use certain terms, like for example, corporate social responsibilities, we need to give a definition of that, so that when they answer that question, they answer with full knowledge of what CSR is about. Okay, so that is useful for the respondents to ensure that we generate a relevant or a useful answer from them. Okay. Again, the question has to be free from ambiguity. Ambiguity means vagueness or lack of clarity. Okay, so the question must be clear. That's the bottom line. If you have question that is too difficult to understand, then of course you will not be able to get the respondent to answer properly, and what you get is in the end is a useless data. Okay. Again, indirect approach for sensitive question, giving them times when necessary, and giving allowances for unframed opinion and categories to make sure that to make it easy for them to give you their answers or to fill up the questionnaire. Okay, so this is actually a repetition of the what we have already mentioned before. So I hope that because it is repeated, it is easy for you to remember, and when you are doing your own instrumentation later as a researcher. All right, thank you. Bye bye.